The Australian this morning is reporting this year's budget deficit will be $161 billion. Is that true?
But we've seen a profound improvement in relation to this year's budget bottom line, and that is as a result of the fact that the economy has been performing more strongly, particularly more Australians back into jobs. And we know that by getting more people back into jobs, we reduce the welfare bill, we increase the taxation and the revenue coming in, and indeed just by having 200,000 fewer people on JobSeeker at the start of this year than had been forecast has delivered a $5 billion turnaround, and you get other dividends that flow through across the economy. And that's why at the heart of tonight's budget, our focus very much is on how do we keep that jobs growth continuing, because that is how we make sure we can pay for the essential services Australians want us to invest in.
Will the deficit be $161 billion? It strikes me as a very precise figure. You wouldn't be leaking key figures like that to a newspaper, would you?
But people will be able to see all of the forward projections around the budget bottom line.
Are we talking about $160 billion?
Well, there's definitely been a profound improvement in relation to the budget bottom line for this current financial year. And so people will be able to see the details of that tonight. But what's driving it is most important, and that is the fact that our economy has bounced back more strongly, and we have more Australians in work today than at any time in the nation's history. Now this time last year, as we were dealing with the grips of the pandemic, many would have thought that a completely impossible objective to have. It certainly exceeded all projections or assumptions, and indeed we're in a position where elsewhere around the world, the Eurozone appears to be slipping back into recession, facing a double-dip recession. The Australian economy is managing to withstand those uncertainties.
OK, let's talk jobs, and jobs are hanging in the balance in the tourism industry. On the show as well yesterday we had Margie Osmond, the head of the Transport and Tourism Forum. As you know, she was venting, talking about the industry being in big trouble if the government does not tonight set out clear timelines on both the vaccination schedule and the reopening of the borders. I want to start with the last part. You've talked about the border reopening deep into 2022. What does that mean? Are we talking June, July, August, the latter part of 2022? When will it reopen?
The honest answer there, Michael, is we don't know and we can't know, because ultimately we have to be informed by the health advice around how the vaccine rollout will actually protect Australians. Being vaccinated will help you or me not get sick, and so that's really important from an individual level. But it doesn't necessarily stop us from giving COVID to somebody else in the community.
Can you understand the uncertainty being felt by key sectors of the economy like tourism?
I can definitely understand that, and it's why, again, tonight's budget will be one in which we reinvest in terms of continuing to drive economic growth. This is a budget where, yes, we will look to the long-term services Australians expect in aged care, in disability services and the like, but it's also a budget where we are still handling the pandemic, responding to the pandemic, and in that investing in the continued economic growth by encouraging investment, funding for skills and training that can help to really drive the jobs growth of the future.
Let's talk about the other assumption we'll all be looking for tonight. That's the vaccination rollout. We know the early deadline at the end of this year won't be met, so we're talking about something into 2022 as well before all Australians are fully vaccinated.
So we are still driving to make sure that vaccine rollout happens as fast as possible.
But we know it won't be this year. The Prime Minister says he can't give a guarantee it won't be the end of this year. So
no, there are
2 + 2 means that it means next year.
There are many uncertainties. I spoke before about the uncertainty around transmissions that come from even people who have been vaccinated. There, of course, are uncertainties around the supply of vaccines, as we've seen with those international disruptions, around Australians' confidence. And the message certainly we want Australians to hear is that they should follow the health advice. They should absolutely go out and get vaccinated when it's their turn to do so, and we'll continue to drive that message through the year. But it does face uncertainties, and we're being honest in acknowledging those. OK, now we know there are going to be truckloads of cash thrown around tonight. It looks and smells like a pre-election budget. On the other hand, the Prime Minister has said a couple of times now he's a so-called full-termer Prime Minister, which means the election won't be until next year. So on that basis, do you expect him to honour his pledge to the Australian people and not hold the election until next year? Look, the Prime Minister will choose when the election will be. This budget is delivering on the promises we made at the last election. You know, we went to that last election saying that we would invest in the economy to grow jobs and to fund the essential services that Australians rely on. And so that's why in this budget we've got the focus on growing jobs. Yes, we didn't see at the last election there'd be a pandemic and a recession that was induced by that pandemic, but the investment in skills, the investment in investment attraction incentives to keep the economy growing and jobs growing, The investment then, $17 billion additional support into the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We promised we would fully fund it.
Well, just on
we
the
are
National
fully
Disability
funding
Insurance Scheme, the ABC reported last night that the funding for that is expected to rival Medicare within 3 years of $30 billion. Do we have an unsustainable funding model for the NDIS?
So we absolutely have a very growing program in the NDIS. We've got record numbers of participants there, more than was ever forecast to be the case. And that's why, as a government, we are honouring our commitment to fully fund it, managing the program for those record participants. But of course, we will manage it as carefully as possible to make sure it's sustainable for the future too.
Simon Birmingham, you've got a big day ahead. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning.
Thanks, Michael. My pleasure.